Hello, good morning from Chile. My name is Rodrigo. I'm a veterinarian. I work currently for the European Commission for the Control of Foot and Mouth Disease at the Food and Agriculture Organization Rome headquarters. And I'm also a lecturer in veterinary public health at the University of Glasgow. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers for inviting me to give this talk. In the frame of the World Food Safety Day, uh, the third version of it is, I don't know if this is the third time that you are organizing it, but definitely it's the third time that this um, date or celebration for food safety is organized. So the topic I will be talking about today is raw milk and food safety. I think raw milk has different aspects to cover, and there are definitely different approaches depending on which country and what war region we are talking about. So I will be talking a little bit about what would happen in traditional systems, maybe mostly in developing countries, including mine, and also about what is going on regarding raw milk in developed countries. Um, so, first of all, uh, I will tell you about the agenda, and I will talk first about some general aspects of milk and raw milk, then about raw milk perceptions, uh, hazards, traditional systems, some recommendations, suggestions, and then some final remarks. Just to say that even though I do work for FAO and I do work for the University of Glasgow, some of the statements or recommendations I may mention, these are personal and they do not necessarily represent the views of any of the organizations for which I work. So, raw milk. What is raw milk? And according to the definition of the European Union legislation, raw milk refers to a product from the secretion of mammary glands of farm animals that has not been heated to more than 40 degrees Celsius or undergone any treatment that has an equivalent effect. So please remember that when we're talking about, we'll be talking about some thermal treatments, there are many of them, but again, raw milk, it is a milk that didn't go for any of these heat treatments. Now, when we talk about milk as well, what is relevant when we're talking about food safety is because we, of course, we consume it in most countries, not everyone. Remember that in many places, there have been a trend for leaving aside animal origin food products for many reasons. Though even in the countries where this is happening, the proportion of people that are going for veganism, it is not the most representative proportion of the population. So still we are consuming, or most people are consuming milk and are relevant to the nutritional aspects and the benefit for the daily diet. And it is because milk is a very good source of nutrients. We have fats, uh, we have proteins where casein would be the most important. It's from there is where we produce most of the cheese when we are talking about milk products. We have sugars, where lactose, of course, is the carbohydrate present in milk. Water, but not perhaps the part of nutrients, but remember that water is or represent the largest proportion of the constituents of milk, with nearly 85%, and variable between species, variable between breeds of animals that produce it, and also would be a source of a good source of minerals like calcium and magnesium. It will have also some vitamins like A, D, C, but perhaps the in some of the vitamins like in the daily diet will not have a very big relevance. Uh, then when we talk about consumption in different world regions, we will see that the consumption per person is variable. My understanding is that India is one of the, if not the largest consumer of milk, and one of the largest producers of milk. But here, when we are looking at the consumption per person per year, we see that India is a bit lower than other countries. However, bear in mind that this is per person, and population in India is over 1,000 million or a billion, depending which one of these two systems you use. Um, so, what happened with the trends? What will happen, or the projections? And we can see, well, first of all, that in some areas of the world, like China, historically anyway, dairy production and dairy consumption have been quite low. Sub-Saharan Africa also as well, while in other areas of the world tend to be higher, like European Union, US, India, Pakistan. What happened in the projections for nearly 10 years now ahead, we see that in most of the countries or the regions in the world, consumption seems to be quite steady with very um, small increases. And we can see here in the European Union, perhaps increases more related to processed dairy products like cheese. Um, while Latin America more or less stable, as in China, Sub-Saharan Africa. On the other hand, the projections for India and Pakistan are steady increase, particularly when we are talking about fresh dairy products, and in that we include, of course, milk. And in general, the projection for world level, it is that there will be an increase in the demand of dairy products. But bear in mind that this increase in the demand will be driven in the projections mostly by India, mostly by Pakistan, and considering the steady increase in the population. Now, when we talk about fresh dairy products, still we are talking about the majority when we are talking particularly in informal trade. We are talking about pasteurized dairy products, like pasteurized bottled milk and packed milk that you may find in shops. Um, so in pasteurization, we use it because we want to increase the level of safety of the product, as well as to increase the shelf life of the product. So as a definition for pasteurization, we know that is the process of heating every particle of milk or milk product in properly designed and operated equipment, as said the one that you have in the image, which is a pasteurizer, for a specific time temperature combination. The most common, the one that we call the HTST, high temperature short time, just used in most of the dairy factories, will be performed for 72 degrees for 15 seconds. We have also slow methods, 63 degrees for 30 seconds, the VAT pasteurization, and we have other thermal treatments such as ultra high temperature and sterilization of milk. But when we talk about pasteurization, we are trying to inhibit particularly three microorganisms, Mycobacterium bovis, Brucella abortus, and Coxella brunetti, which are highly linked to zoonotic events through the consumption of raw milk. But we and the talk is about the raw milk consumption, and as I say, raw milk consumption could happen for different reasons. It could be because of lack of facilities for pasteurization. It could be because there is a traditional system where raw milk will be consumed in that way because it has always been in that way, because there are no ways to heat it, because traditional products are made with raw milk, etc. But it can also be because and as it happened, and it's happening in many countries in Europe, how it's happening in the US, because some groups of the population are interested in what they feel is a more natural way to consume food products. And among these, it is the consumption of raw milk instead of pasteurized milk or all milk that is undergoing any other thermal treatment. And is that good or bad? Is it good or bad for food safety, which is the main thing that we're talking today? Is it good or bad for nutrition and for health? And when I'm talking about health, I'm not necessarily talking about food safety, but health in your general well-being, because particularly the claims that they are related to the consumption of raw milk. Something that I would like to touch very briefly on when we're talking about if it's maybe with the claims that are insisting of this product to be a good product. When these claims are made, they will refer, or they tend to refer to the presence of a complex microbiota in raw milk, which is in a way true when we're talking about raw milk versus pasteurized milk, because the pasteurization process, as well as the other thermal processes, will inhibit or destroy not only pathogenic microorganisms of concern, they will destroy many other microorganisms present in the milk. And some of them are beneficial microorganisms. I mean, if you think about some products like yogurt, for example, they are made using microorganisms that we have isolated from the normal microbiota of the milk. So we know that we have the GRAS microorganisms present there. They're generally regarded as safe microorganisms that we use for further technological procedures, but also we have pathogenic ones. So these graphs that you have there, they are comparing the microbiota in raw milk with pasteurized milk from buffalo milk. And you can see here in the first column the raw milk, 2 hours of refrigeration, then 24, 48, and 72, and the same for the non-pasteurized milk. And you can see over time for both cases, the raw on your left and the pasteurized on your right, how the microbiota will change over time. So with this, I want to say that it is true that you may have a more complex microbiota. Here looks quite similar in the first column for both, but there are many reports indicated and demonstrating that there is a more complex microbiota in raw milk, which again, as I say, it is not something surprising because we are killing many microorganisms through pasteurization process. But also I have to say that that complexity and the microorganisms that may be present at the beginning will not be the ones that will be present in 1, 2, or 3 days. Because still you will have a multiplication of microorganisms under refrigeration conditions. And and you may have still the increase of some spoilers in there, and you may not have necessarily beneficial microorganisms later on. You can see also there are some other variations that have been shown by other authors, like this one, that Chinese group that were looking at the variation of the microbiota in raw milk over a period of 12 months, where you can see that you have 3 different phylum. The Acinetobacter, Firmicutes, and Protobacteria, and how they actually have a huge variation in what is the proportion of the total population of the raw milk during the year, because there are many factors like animal feeding, temperature, humidity, the bedding, etc., in the environment that will affect and influence what sort of microbiota you have there. So when there are claims about, okay, a specific microbiota would be there and would be beneficial for your health, well, we have a lot of factors that will influence what you have in that raw milk. However, when we look at what are the perceptions of the consumers, there would be maybe some different views. There is this very small qualitative research piece from the Madison College, University of Wisconsin, where they interviewed producers and consumers to see why they would be drinking raw milk or why they would be selling raw milk. So the people were 13 people that were buying and approximately the same number of farmers. And for the consumers, the reason for buying, or the most common reason for them to buy raw milk would have been for their own health, thinking about how beneficial it would be for the immune system and many other things. It would be for supporting small family farms, for cultivating relationships with the farmer as well, and because of these organoleptic characteristics of the dairy product. While for farmers, one of the main drivers will be price. In this particular example, the money that they will be getting from by selling raw milk directly to the consumers could be 3 times per gallon. I think it was gallon what they were using there, than what they will get by selling that milk to a company processing milk. That, and I think it's a fair comment that they need to get an economic return that would be suitable for them. But then I put these pictures as well from that they found in internet, where you have these two different sort of views from why you may be having raw milk and why consumers will have access to raw milk. So in the one on the top, you will see someone that was taken from a developing country, and I don't know if they stage it or not, but you have this picture of a little child drinking milk directly from an animal. And I saw this with horror, thinking about all the zoonotic risks or zoonotic hazard that this little child will be exposed to. The one below, it is from Spain, from the Catalonia region in Spain, where farmers start a campaign in Twitter for defending the raw milk, and then they film themselves and they pictures themselves, these farmers drinking also directly from the udder of their animals. So what I wanted to say with some of them, they maybe in a way put it in the need of drinking it raw, while others may be looking for it, because of these claims that are really hard to address regarding the perceptions of the consumers and how to communicate the hazards, and not only to communicate the hazards, for perhaps the acceptance from these sectors of the public on science statements. So, and having said that, I mean, you can find a statement like this one, that raw milk never goes bad. And I don't know if from the public watching this presentation, if you consume milk and if you buy raw milk, maybe you are from India, for what my friends from India have told me, is that still there are a large proportion of the population that will be buying milk from a person selling it locally. But that what people will normally do when doing that is to boil it immediately or as soon as possible, and then store it, refrigerate it, they'll consume it and using it for recipes, etc. And if you haven't done that, I don't know if in your experience, but definitely my experience when buying in that way, if I don't boil the milk immediately that I buy raw from a person selling it in the street, that milk will clot in my pan. But claims that are coming through social media. They made these campaigns that never goes bad. And here you can see a statement from someone in Twitter say that I can attest that raw milk never spoiled. And I don't know what milk they are buying because I don't think that's uh, a true statement. So let's see in a little bit more detail on the claims with related to raw milk and the benefit claims. So some examples that we have about drinking raw milk will prevent you to weight gain. It will strengthen your immune system. There was this statement in a website, the Raw Milk Institute, talking about in a particular um, internet page on COVID-19, talking about how consuming raw milk will strengthen your immune system in a way, portraying it as it will protect you from COVID-19, which I find it really dangerous. Um, and also there are some other like control blood pressure and many other more. So I put there below the complementary therapies in medicine with that study on perceived health, mood, and immune functioning among U.S. Adults. This is in the bottom left. Uh, so this one also is they are talking about how um, mood and immune functioning has improved through the consumption of raw milk, but it is a retrospective um, qualitative data through a survey, so there is no um, any quantitative method that could give you some indication of how this has improved. And then you have others like raw milk producers with high levels of hygiene safety, talking about um, how producers, milk producers, in a way, as a blanket, all of them, they have a good microbiological standards, meaning that it should be safe to consume, which I think also is quite biased and a very narrow vision. I would agree that some producers milk producers, they will be producing raw milk at a high standard. But also I have seen many, and I have visited many countries in the UK, in Spain, Belgium, Chile, Cyprus, etc. And some of them I would frankly don't drink it if I boil it. So it's not that everyone produces at the same level, but also all this benefit that you will find a lot of claims and benefits of consuming raw milk. You need to be very critical when appraising that information and where is the evidence and what is the quality of the evidence that they are presenting. Uh, for example, there is this systematic review from McDonald from 2011, who was looking at the claims and doing a systematic review of benefit claims. So regarding the nutritional quality of the milk, the raw milk compared with the pasteurized one, so that basically there are no differences because the components of the milk that will decrease, they are not necessarily relevant in our diet or from milk to be the source of these nutrients. So vitamin 12, B12, and E decrease, vitamin A increase. I don't know why, what happened there with the data that they have. Um, and vitamin C concentration, there were random things. But with vitamin B2, was the only perhaps concern regarding, okay, there is a significant decrease according to the evidence that is in literature, and B2 and milk could be, or milk would be a good source of B2 vitamin for consumers. So there may be something further exploration is needed on see what is there. But overall, regarding the nutritional composition of milk, raw or pasteurized, there is strong evidence that there is no problem. And this is not the all the article, by the way, saying that that there is no a relevant decrease on the nutritional quality. Uh, then there were other claims that they were looking at the systematic review. For example, the ones talking about that consuming raw milk will decrease the risk of allergies. However, and we have been in some meetings discussing these aspects of the allergies. Are massive studies where there are a lot of other differences with the population involved in these cohort studies, where there are many other confounding factors, like people living in farms versus living in cities. So is living in an outdoor environment and drink more important than the consumption of raw milk in the lower incidence on allergies or not? So that there is no clarity with these health claims. But also bear in mind, again, when looking at these studies, evaluate and balance how strong, how robust it is, the evidence, how robust have been the studies, the material methods, and all the experimental design in order to weight these the conclusions that they have. Now we have a lot of hazards related to the consumption of raw milk, and therefore we have the measure of pasteurization for before commercializing milk. And it is because milk is a highly perishable product and requires to be processed shortly after collection. So it's not something that can last forever, as some of the people are claiming, the protectors or the champions for raw milk consumption. It cannot be stored for more than a few days. And as for any other food product, when we are looking at how risky they could be for consumption, you will have a mix of physical, chemical, and biological risk that you need to assess. And I will just briefly touch in some of them. I think I will do it more in the biological ones because I think for some of the others they may need their talk on their own. So according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, raw milk is milk from any animal that has not been pasteurized and can carry harmful bacteria. And therefore, because I mean, and this is not a statement only from the US, but because of this risk for harmful bacteria that could be present in milk, we have a legal frame in different countries. I'm not particularly sure on what would be the legal frame in Europe, sorry, in India, but in Europe, I know it will be variable. In the US, will be variable. Within the UK, where I have worked for a long time, is variable. Where, for example, in Wales and England, it is allowed to sell raw milk, while in Scotland it is illegal. In the US, it's the same. Most of the states in the United States ban the commercialization of raw milk, while some of them they will allow it. But the places where raw milk is allowed to be sold, like in the UK and the US, they will have also some rules. But I put this one on the bottom because this was about a politician or a group of politicians getting ill after drinking raw milk to celebrate legalizing raw milk in that particular state in the US. And again, champions of raw milk consumption. So you read the news and appear in many newspapers at the time, and not only English based. You will see the statements of the politicians after they got ill. You know, they could be from anything. There are a lot of microorganisms going around the area, so necessarily wasn't because of the milk, but it could have been. Now, when going back to the hazards and the physical, chemical, and biological hazards, they have many sources. It's also multifactorial, and we need to consider again a One Health approach and a food chain approach along all the steps in the process. So the hazards that could be present in milk could be related to the health of the dairy herd, because a lot of microorganisms, when we talk about biological hazards, are zoonotic, and we have a lot of microorganisms that could be present in the udder of the cow, or could be getting ill the cow, and then if they could be shed in milk, could be present in milk, and if we consume it, we will get ill. It will be related to the quality of the raw milk in general, because you have again the general quality of the raw milk, because there are a lot of other things that you may have there in milk, including microorganisms that may not be related to what was present in the animal, but it may have been present in the environment. And when we talk about environment, these are food contact materials. If you're using a milking machine, how clean and disinfected is equipment. If you are using a container, the same thing apply. And then affecting the quality, the microbiological quality of the milk. Pre-storage conditions are the same. Do you have electricity? If you have electricity for the refrigeration system, is the refrigeration system well maintained? Can it hold the temperature at below 4 degrees Celsius? So the storage facility and technologies, and the hygiene of the animals, environment, and workers. And that's also critical, because some of the microorganisms, particularly with the microorganisms, that could be present in milk and could get us ill, are not microorganisms that necessarily are causing a disease in the mammary gland. They are not producing, or they are not related to mastitis as an overproliferation of bacteria that normally live there, but they will be related to the hygiene of the environment. Some of the fecal microorganisms, particularly, may not even necessarily be related to the animal, but to the workers' hygiene and the availability of water as well that they will have, and the quality of the water that they have for washing themselves or washing the equipment. So we need to put preventative measures in order to reduce these hazards. And where to put these preventative measures, it must be in the pre-harvest and the post-harvest section of the process. So it is not one or the other, but it is both of them. And when we are talking about the pre-harvest, we are talking about the good farming practices. And good farming practices could include, as you can see in the video below, this is with a robotic equipment for milking cattle. They are cleaning the teats before starting the milking process. They are drying them as well. You have the process of stripping, so eliminating the first milk that the animal has, where you will have the highest proportion of microorganisms. And also, I would and a well-trained person during the milking process must check that first milk that is eliminated in the stripping process in order to identify if there is any sign of physical alteration of the milk that may give an indication of mastitis for that milk not enter the human food chain. And these are just some few examples. And when we are talking about the post-harvest, we are talking mostly about the food safety management systems, where could be systems as hazard analysis, critical control point, looking at every step in the process, where the hazards are, how to control them. But we always have to start with the prerequisites and good practices. So, as I say, with the hazards, I will not touch the physical hazards in this presentation. I will just talk this little bit about the chemical hazards, where perhaps the most important are antimicrobial residues, And the only reason why we'll talk a little bit about it, only and not touch it in depth, is because the antimicrobial residues, I think it deserves a topic on its own. Um, and it's just one aspect here for raw milk, or for consumption of milk and dairy products in general. So bear in mind that we need to consider the responsible use of antimicrobials when we're talking about animals. Data from the European Food Safety Authority in Europe, so in the European Union, look at the gram-negative isolates in dairy, and nearly half of them were either found extended spectrum beta-lactamase resistant or tetracycline resistant. So we need to be very careful when we're talking about this, the use of antimicrobials, the presence of antimicrobials in milk, and that milk doesn't enter the human food chain. But also bear in mind that this is within the scope of One Health, because the exposure to antimicrobials of animals as well as humans, it is not coming only through um, through the administration, direct administration of antimicrobials, but also may come from environmental contamination. And if you're interested, there is this very interesting book on antibiotic resistance in the environment with a particular chapter on the resistant sanitation in India, where they discuss about antibiotic levels in water sources, etc. And then when we're talking about these water sources, is water sources from where we will be drinking, the animals will be drinking, and you may have an accumulative effect with some of the antimicrobials. So I will leave it till this. Just bear in mind that there are some chemical hazards in milk, and on one of the chemical hazards is the presence of antimicrobials. Um, and how important is testing? Perhaps with antimicrobials, it really doesn't matter. It will be raw or pasteurized, because pasteurization doesn't necessarily inactivate the presence of antimicrobial. It may inactivate the presence of um, microorganisms that are carrying genes that allow them resistance to antimicrobials, but it doesn't necessarily inactivate antimicrobials. Now, the one that I wanted to talk the most is about the biological hazards. Remember, milk is a food product rich in nutrients. It's ideal for many microorganisms to grow. We have, aside of the generally regarded as safe, that part of the normal microbiota in milk, we will have spoiler microorganisms. So these are the microorganisms that will make the milk sour, and or clot it when we don't want it to. And we have the pathogens ones that will make us ill. In the European Union, regarding the pathogens and how we can identify them, we have some surveillance systems in place. And in fact, for the members of the European Union, they must carry surveillance, and this is not only for milk, but they must carry surveillance for the following microorganisms: Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria, Shiga toxin, E. coli, Mycobacterium, Brucella, Trichinella, Echinococcus. And then additionally, you have some other ones that they need to report what is going on. I highlighted in blue some of the ones that would be more important when we are talking about dairy products, because of the association to outbreaks. Okay, so parts of the first one: Cryptosporidiosis, Yersiniosis, and Staphylococcal toxins. And in the European Union, only between 2007 and 2012, there were 27 outbreaks related to milk. Most of them related to Campylobacter, Salmonella, Shiga toxin, E. coli, and other E. colis. And a total of 4 out of the 27 outbreaks were raw milk from goats and the other one from cows. Now, um, please bear in mind again evidence and what we have with this. So these are the reported outbreaks and the association as well of the attribution to a food product. This is what we know, but it will really depend from one side of people going to a medical doctor if they get ill. So a case potentially can be investigated. It will depend then from the health system if they will be investigating the illness, and then additionally to investigating why the person got ill, to do the tracing back to the food product. So not every person that will get ill will be reported. Not every reported and confirmed case we will be able to find out what is the attributed food product. Now, with the specific microorganisms, from the list from the European Union, I wanted to go to just to 4 or 5 of them. The first of them, Mycobacterium bovis, because it's one of the microorganisms of the reason why we are pasteurizing milk. In many developed countries, particularly in the European Union, I would say at least half of the European Union members are free of bovine tuberculosis. Therefore, there is where people are talking about safety of consumption of raw milk, because this disease will not be present. However, bear in mind that bovine tuberculosis is still around, and there are many reported cases still of outbreaks of bovine tuberculosis in humans related to the consumption of raw milk. So I found this one from India, prevalence of zoonotic tuberculosis and associated risk factors in central India, and then they were talking about something around 10% in different areas that were assessed in central India, where people were positive to Mycobacterium bovis. I found this other case just as an example of people getting ill in Ireland through the consumption of raw milk. So normally the cases are not so many now, at least in developed countries, when we're talking about zoonotic tuberculosis. But bear in mind that it's not only about how many people get ill, but also what are the consequences. And in the example from Ireland, you could see that at least one of the family members was with antibiotic treatment for more than a year, and then with potentially with some side effects, etc. So the impact in the quality of life and the impact of health is far beyond of having just that only person ill, and also the age that you need to consider, where milk products particularly, because of the quality and the nutritional aspects of milk, it will be focusing in younger people, in children, in pregnant women, in elderly people, which are also some of the most susceptible groups of the population for diseases because of being immunocompromised, because of having, like in the case of children, an immune system that is not fully functional, etc. And Mycobacterium is going around. I don't know in India how's the situation with tuberculosis in cattle. I found many reports talking about tuberculosis being present in there, and then definitely if you have people that are getting infected with Mycobacterium bovis. But is there a program for control and eradication of the disease, which maybe it would be challenging for India? Programs of controlling and eradicating the disease from cattle, particularly from cattle, include the culling of animals, and culling of animals may not be a solution because of cultural reasons, religious reasons, ethical reasons, etc. So if that's not possible, regarding control and eradication of the disease, and knowing really what is the epidemiological situation of the condition, would it be safe to consume raw milk? Now, Brucella is another microorganism that we particularly target with pasteurization, and very complicated microorganism, intracellular infection, with a long incubation time that then can make difficult association of an infection and the attribution of an infection to a food product, if it was a food product, through consumption of a food product, the way in which a person got infected. Um, but again, around the world, you can still find a lot of cases of people getting brucellosis. In the UK, where I have worked for many years, we are Brucella free. So again, one of the um, arguments for going for or getting more flexibility to raw milk consumption, because well, okay, we are Brucella free, but introduction and reintroduction of diseases. It is far more challenging now than ever because of globalization, even though with the restriction of COVID-19, that means less international travel, still risk is always there. And you can see here examples of people getting ill in Spain, sorry, through consumption of unpasteurized raw milk. This was quite interesting because it was in Spain from Moroccan migrants. So at the beginning they thought, okay, it must come from Morocco. Morocco is a developing country, but actually was acquired in Spain. And the reason for this Moroccan family to drink unpasteurized milk was related to um, considering that there were a lot of beneficial effects to the consumption of raw milk, while in reality you get this horrible disease with undulant fever, potentially reproductive problems, intra-articular inflammation. So we are not talking necessarily about microorganisms that will produce vomiting and diarrhea, but far more severe consequences related to an infection. Uh, these other ones I grouped them: Salmonella, Campylobacter, Shiga toxin, producing E. coli, Cryptosporidium, as all of them are related to fecal contamination. So these in when we are talking about the European Union, most of the outbreaks, foodborne outbreaks associated to the consumption of raw milk and raw milk products, are associated to these microorganisms that are still present. So, gastrointestinal microorganisms greater than Mycobacterium or Brucella, where we have control a little bit more regarding animal health, but we haven't been able to control completely the problem of fecal contamination in the production. Uh, for some of them, depending on which one we are talking, also we will have longer incubation times. That could be, for example, Yersinia, it could be 10 days, and also difficult to find the attribution when the cases are and when the cases are investigated, uh, to look for which one was the most likely source of the infection. Um, but still, we know that from the ones that have, we know and we found the attribution or the strong attribution, most of them, they tend to be from Campylobacter. Now, in a study from the US, from a 10-year period, also they found E. coli, Campylobacter, and Salmonella, the most common sources of foodborne illness associated to raw milk, with in that period 93 outbreaks, nearly 2,000 cases, nearly 200 hospitalization, and 2 deaths. Listeria monocytogenes, variable. I included here because we have the monitoring of Listeria in general, not necessarily for raw milk for the European Union. And there are a lot of reports that you will find about Listeria monocytogenes and the presence absence in raw milk. I found the 3 from India and Central India, Agra and Tamil Nadu, all of them reporting something between 2 and 5% of presence of Listeria monocytogenes in milk. Now, how relevant they could be for as a zoonosis in raw milk if you drink it fresh, I don't know. It may be variable, and it may not be the biggest concern, because Listeria will need um, time to multiply again. And if you are doing for PCR, yeah, you have the presence, but how much? I didn't find it necessarily for these articles, and at least in the European Union, Listeria wouldn't necessarily be associated too much to raw milk as it would be for other products, including dairy products like soft cheeses, where the presence of the microorganism is not necessarily associated to the presence of Listeria in raw milk, but mostly to cross-contamination during the process. So it's still to have it present as a potential hazard in milk, but there is no as much. There are not as many reported cases associated to raw milk consumption and listeriosis as with, for example, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and E. coli. And the final one that I wanted to put from this group of biological hazards is the staphylococcal enterotoxins, where again there are reports of staphylococcal enterotoxins, but I wanted to put this one about pasteurized milk because, as I mentioned earlier, the microbiological quality of milk will depend on many factors, particularly, I mean, starting with the pre-harvest. And with the Staphylococcus aureus, there is this very interesting bit where we do not get an infection, but we get an intoxication. And if we don't manage well the pre-harvest factors and cleanliness, health status, storage of milk, etc., even if we pasteurize the milk, but we gave the time or the opportunity for Staphylococcus aureus to be present and to produce the toxin, we can destroy Staph aureus with pasteurization, but the toxin will continue present. So that's why you will find reports with staphylococcal enterotoxins in pasteurized products, where most likely this was referred to, or no, no, these cases tend to be associated to problems with the pre-harvest and pre-process and before pasteurization. Okay, so this is just an array of potential biological hazards that could be present in milk, and all of them, uh, perhaps with the exception of staphylococcal enterotoxins, can be managed by pasteurization. This doesn't necessarily mean that we need to rely on pasteurization only to um, to control the hazards, and that farmers shouldn't do anything to control or prevent the introduction and keeping health status, etc. But there are so many factors that are um, related to the presence of microorganisms, uh, where you need to put in the balance, uh, do the benefits of drinking raw milk where there is no evidence of health benefits, strong evidence about health benefits. There is more evidence about taste, structure, etc. Do the benefits in flavor and the preference in flavor weigh more than the benefits on health or the prevention of health? So, in the UK, there have been again this push in Wales and England in giving more flexibility for the commercialization of raw milk, and the government, what they decided is to uh, produce guidance. So they are not banning it in England and Wales, but they are producing further guidance for producers and what to do. And what to do is, in their guidance, the Food Standard Agency recommended particularly to have an effective food safety management system, uh, that they have good temperature controls, they have general farm hygiene conditions, facilities, milking parlor, cleanliness status, etc., documentations in place, um, that for them that if they have animals under medical treatment, the milk is not placed in the market, structural integrity, cleaning procedures, etc., which is very pretty in concept, and I agree with this guidance. But the problem is how you enforce it. And I would say that at the moment, uh, I would be very blunt and say that if we are talking about veterinary controls, we don't have enough in the UK. And we struggle with the capacity. And I say we struggle because again, part of my work is in the UK. We struggle to have veterinarians interested in going to this part of the veterinary job, and provide this sort of advice. So the farmers will have veterinarians. It's not that they won't have them, but the veterinarians will go mostly for the health plans, and they won't get involved necessarily with the food safety aspect, and then from the official control from the veterinary services. Um, in the UK, this sort of checks are not done by veterinarians. Uh, it is done by technical staff because there is not enough capacity. And also bear in mind also that this guidance is not necessarily enforcement. And some of the things that they asked is about best practice, and this is, I highlighted what I was telling you. The food business operator are recommended to sample. Uh, Once a failed sample from the milk regarding microbiological standard, it is recommended that the food business operator sees the distribution. But these are recommendations, and I don't want to say that food business operators won't do it. Good food good food business operators will do it, but that doesn't mean that everyone will. And it also, unfortunately, as I say, we in parallel with this, there is no enough capacity to check everyone. So one of the things they would think perhaps with this scheme is that the government is asking for the registration of the producers of raw milk, so it is easy to identify them. But this is just an ongoing process, and we do have in the UK outbreaks of foodborne disease outbreak related to the consumption of raw milk, as with the other countries, with E. coli, with salmonella, with fecal contaminants. So we know that not every single farmer complies with the good practices. So from where do you can get this raw milk, and again there are different ways, and it will depend very much of legislation in each country. You may get it from supermarkets in some places, and not in the UK. I don't think we can do it in Europe. You can get it from dispensers, which is something that you will see in many continental European countries. So I have seen it in Italy, for example, where you will have I think I saw it in Slovenia as well, in dispensers of raw milk in the street, and you go put your coin and you get your raw milk in a machine that is refrigerated. But it will depend again on the legislation in each country. You may get it better you can get it in small businesses and informal sector, like in farmers markets, in the street, or in the case of the UK, where according to the legislation in England and Wales, you can get it only from the farmers gate, and also from farmers market. But the farmers gate means that you need to go directly to the farmer and buy it from the farm. It is not that the farmer can sell it in the local shop, or sell it raw in the supermarket. You must go to the farmer's gate. Um, Having said that, this is when we are talking about a developed country. In developing countries, it may be different, and there may be some flexibilities for different reasons. So the two pictures here from Chile, and this is actually outside in my street, where every day this person goes with this trolley pulled by a horse, selling milk from the farm of this guy that is in the peri-urban area. And you will have this, now is winter, or late autumn, early winter, so there is a cold temperature. But in summer, when we have 30 degrees or more, you will have the same in a farm where there is no tap water, in a system that is not refrigerated, and where he will need a couple of hours to distribute that milk around town. So the microbiological quality of that milk probably will not be the best, and definitely what people do when they buy from him, it is to boil the milk immediately after that. Also, so you have a lot of factors that can increase the food safety risk. the way, this is another way, by the way, how other people sell it. This is my mother actually buy it for another guy that is selling milk, and he sells it in water, so in plastic bottles from soft drinks. So once the soft drinks are empty, he uses and reuses this plastic bottle. So my mom has to buy it, empty the raw milk in a pan, and then we return this plastic bottle to the person for them to use it for the next day when sells milk again. And what about cleaning disinfection procedures? Are they standardized? Are they doing it properly? Is there any testing? Is there any biofilm, bacterial biofilm formation in there that will increase microbiological risk for the consumer? Uh, so in these traditional systems, it may be a little bit harder in to put this control, to monitor how many are there, how much capacity they will need from not only veterinary control, but from public health controls to monitor every single producer, small producer. And I don't know how many there will be in India. Maybe, I mean, as far as I understand, not necessarily with a trolley pulled by a horse, but you will have in many areas also a more traditional system for selling milk. Could you think that people will be safe in drinking it raw, as is advertised in many developed countries, that raw milk will be safe enough because it has healthy bacteria in it? I mean, for me, it couldn't. Um, so how we can reduce this risk? And one is making stronger uh, policy regarding banning raw milk, or not necessarily banning it, but putting standards, and standards that need to be monitored, not only a written paper saying that this is what you have to do, but monitoring that people are doing what they are supposed to do. However, the problem with policy that we have is there any trust in the policymakers? I don't know how the situation in India, but I think in my country, for example, there is no a lot of trust at the moment with policymakers, and a lot of it. I mean, especially now when we're talking about COVID situation and how COVID have been managed in many countries, because of the outbreak is still not being controlled. Politicians are losing even more credibility. So will they believe, consumers, will they believe when they say, you have risk with this, that there are hazards associated to this? A challenge. We can reduce it through veterinary capacity, providing a better advice to the farming sector, increasing the surveillance of diseases of microorganisms present in livestock, improving the programs for disease control as well. But that's also challenging because we have two different branches of veterinary services, as veterinary services defined as all the veterinary capacity in a country. We have the private sector, and the private sector offers a service which the farmer needs to pay for. And in developing countries, there would be many livestock owners, small livestock owners, subsistence farming sectors, which will not be able to pay for these services. And the subsistence farming sector still will be producing products like raw milk for their subsistence. Uh, and and from the other side, from the veterinary capacity, from the public sector, from the government vets, what are the priorities regarding disease control? Which ones they need to control, uh, and which ones they can control? Because again, some system for some diseases, part of the disease control, like for tuberculosis, is culling. Is it culling allowed for every country? Will it be money for compensation? Is it culturally acceptable? So there are challenges. With farmer compliance as well, you can reduce it because if they are implementing good farming practices, definitely the hazards and the risk for people will decrease. But it will depend how much compliance a farmer has, and that compliance doesn't necessarily mean, or the non-compliance doesn't necessarily mean that we are dealing with a bad farmer. Non-compliance can be related as well to resources. Again, developing countries, small farmer, subsistence farmer, does it have the person potable water? Um, if it doesn't have potable water for themselves, I will really doubt that they will have potable water for washing the teats of the cow or the goat or the sheep or the camel. Uh, and maybe the water quality they're getting is really poor with high contamination, increasing the risk in there. And it's again not because or they don't have electricity for themselves. Will they have how to refrigerate the milk then? So the non-compliance doesn't necessarily mean um, poor farming on lack of willingness, but it needs to be seen in a wider context. Um, how to reduce the risk again? Another aspect is the evidence to support of the health claims of raw milk when we are talking about not necessarily people that don't have any other way than drinking the raw milk, but people that want to. That will happen in Europe and in the UK. Is there evidence to support it? But again, we have a challenge as with the politicians. To whom people do believe? Do they believe in science? Uh, let's put it with COVID again. With all what is going on with COVID, uh, do people believe in the scientists or not? Uh, if you look at a lot of the claims that people and perhaps the main things that will appear with raw milk consumption, a lot of them are from activists, from farmers, from producers, but not necessarily from scientists. Um, so a lot of work to do there. Alleviation of poverty, I think I have mentioned a lot of things about it, and also with the risk communication and community engagement, because again, policy and science, we know with science about the hazards. This is something that there is a strong evidence association of raw milk consumption to many diseases. Um, but and there are again policies in countries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we will change attitudes. Um, and there is a lot of work to do in how that risk is communicated and how people can get engaged and change cultures and attitudes. What sort of message, what are the roots, who should be giving the message are things also that need to be considered. So overall, and I think now closing down because I may be overrunning with all this, is think about this as a One Health, another um, One Health aspect, where um, animal health, human health is interconnected in regarding the zoonotic risk and animal disease, and also environment, particular with the antimicrobial resistance, but many other factors as well when we are talking about diseases and control and the impact of wildlife, which I didn't touch much again because I think it's a complete different topic, but it is a One Health concept. But also, don't forget that it's a One Welfare concept when we are talking about the risks of raw milk and what we can do. Because also here we are talking about the welfare of animals that will impact in welfare of people in the context that if you are not able to provide appropriate welfare, adequate welfare to the animals, they will be producing less. The farmers, particular subsistence farmers, will be receiving a lower income, impacting their well-being. And then is when we have rules like, for example, in that little trolley that I was showing you from Chile, pulled by a horse from a peri-urban farm. The option in my country many decades ago was we will not ban with these local farmers to sell their milk with very little control and maybe with a higher risk to the community. But the decision there was a very, very, very strong campaign to people, telling them boil your milk before consuming it. So my mom will buy that milk and will boil it. But actually, if she buys from the supermarket pasteurized milk or ultra high temperature milk, still she will boil it, because that message of boiling your milk because boiled milk is safer, it went very, very much in the psyche of everyone. So with the poverty again, this is also raw milk, and the hazards of raw milk is an issue of the Sustainable Development Goals, alleviation of poverty, supporting industry, etc., in order to have a better quality and safety of the products. And there are initiatives like the one from FAO that I just put this example, which I thought it was very interesting, where they were supporting Kazakhstan with the production of applications and animations to improve traditional dairy production, and then farmers through their apps can get veterinary advice or technical advice in how to improve the safety and also the technology of the food products, with support about animal health, animal nutrition, animal breeds, etc. Very holistic approach, using technology in order to allow small farmers that otherwise would have struggled to get support to get it. And with this, we improve food safety and food security. Uh, and the last bit, I think, is that again, with the food security and food safety, also think about COVID and the impact on COVID on raw milk and milk in general. And I'm not talking at all here about raw milk being a risk for human regarding the consumption of raw milk and COVID, but more about the disruption of trade, increases of prices, food shortages. I mean, particularly from Bangladesh, effect of COVID, they were talking about how many tons of milk were left unsold, and they had to be eliminated. And when there are problems with food security, you may have people taking also higher risks regarding food safety. Um, and how they will consume and how they will access the food products and from where they will access them. So there are things also to think about COVID, aside, of course, of the capacity and how much of the human health controls and the veterinary controls have been diverted in order to target the crisis with COVID, meaning that other sectors cannot get as much attention. So in summary, milk is recognized as an excellent food resource. World demand will increase, mostly driven by India and Pakistan, and at least that are the projections. Raw milk sell and demand consumption is driven by many factors, and again, it will depend. And I was making a lot of this separation between developing countries where it may be an issue because of trade, the farmer subsistence, while in developed countries tend to be driven by people very much disconnected from farming system and believing that they want to have a healthier diet, and a healthier diet means to consume raw milk. Um, However, consumption of raw milk is linked to a higher likelihood of foodborne illness, and there is very strong evidence about it. Prevention can benefit of legal time frame, but there are issues that we already discussed associated to this prevention. Good farm practices can reduce the risk of consumer, as well as to increase productivity and economic return, and consumers education is essential. So there you have some reference aside of the ones that I put in the presentation. And thank you very much for inviting me for this. And apologies if I was talking a little bit too fast at times. Thank you very much.